And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Today, I have with me Stephen Camilli, who is the president of ACTEX Learning, and I'm sure many of you know about ACTEX from studying for exams. So welcome, Stephen. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Thanks for coming on. So before we dive in, could you just give us maybe a couple sentences, just a kind of background on yourself and who you are?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I lead ACTEX Learning. I've been here for about 6 years. Before, I have kind of a varied background in the actuarial world. I worked at Unum Provident in my early career down in Argentina. So I worked in Argentina for a couple of years and helped launch
Awesome.
long-term disability insurance down there. I also worked in pensions for a little bit. But then I left the actuarial world for a while. I worked to help set up food banks for several years down in Argentina. And then I also I went into teaching. I taught high school and actuarial math high school and college math for a few years,
Okay,
also
nice.
while down in Argentina. And then I, on the side, often worked as a literary agent. My mother is a literary agent, so I've worked with her to help authors get their books published. And then after a number of years of teaching, I was looking at getting back into the actuarial world, and this opportunity came along at ACTEX, and here I've been now for almost 6 years.
Kind of sounds like you had the perfect blend for ACTEX then, with everything that you've done in the past.
Yeah, it was really incredible when they sent me the job description. It was almost like a description of my past experience. They're looking for an actuary with teaching experience, publishing experience, and if possible, translation experience, because we do also sell some translation rights. And I'd also done some translation work over the years. So it was really an incredible fit for both of us.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was and my first question was going to be if you had any actuarial jobs before ACTEX, and you kind of answered that in your background. How long were you doing that for in the corporate world? And it sounds like you were in pensions mostly.
Well, so I was in pensions for about a year at Hewlett Associates, and then I moved, and then I actually won a Rotary scholarship to study abroad down in Argentina. So I quit my first job after about a year, and then while I was down in Argentina, I wound up founding this other job, a new job while down there at Unum, and there I was working with disability insurance and group life, and I did that for about 3.5 years, and I worked in their first just down in Argentina, and then up in Portland, Maine in their international division. So I worked with their Hong Kong, Japan, and Argentina offices.
That's interesting. So did you find any difference in like the culture, actuarial culture in Argentina versus the US?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. It's, let's see. I mean, a lot of it is also guided by just the difference in country culture as well. But I mean, actuarially speaking, they don't take exams, for example. They get it's a 5-year university degree. And after they get their degree, then they're licensed as an actuary.
Interesting.
It's a much smaller number of actuaries, and they tend to be much more, the insurance companies are generally smaller. So there's a lot more cross practice specialty. I mean, cross specialty practice. So for example, I was working with car reserves, group life, individual life, disability insurance. So you had, as an actuary down there, you had to work in many different areas, you weren't as specialized.
You weren't as specialized, yeah. That probably gave you good exposure to a lot of stuff though, and especially working internationally like you did. So
yes. Yeah,
that's amazing. So then just to kind of back up, how did you even find out about the actuarial profession? Were you interested in math from a young age and you heard about it through that, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I guess from a young age, I'd always loved math. It was kind of my natural passion or my natural fit growing up. I was always, I like doing math problems. I remember this one time when I was younger and my cousins were playing a game and I was like, no, I want to do these math problems over here. So which is
such a nerd.
Yeah. And but then I guess so when I went to college, it just seemed natural to major in math. And I didn't know anything about actuarial science at the time. I majored in pure math and then gradually changed to applied math. But as I moved along further in my math major, it was most math majors either went to graduate school or went into high school teaching, or became an actuary. Those were kind of the three paths, I guess, that were laid before me as the three main paths that I could go as a math major.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by I wasn't so excited about going back to school, and so I had a couple opportunities to apply for actuarial jobs, and an offer came my way, and that's how it came about.
That's perfect. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you went to school where?
So I went to Elizabethtown College for 2 years, and then transferred to Brown University my junior year. So
Oh,
I
nice.
graduated from Brown.
That's awesome. And when you were at Brown, you majored in math. That's what I did too. I majored in math. I didn't go to Brown. I went to Gonzaga, but I actually didn't take a lot of statistics in my math major. I'm curious for yourself if you took much stats or had exposure to that before the actuarial.
Probably not so much. It was definitely more of a general, because I actually started off as a pure math major and then transitioned into applied math. And in
Okay.
the applied math track I was doing, it was actually much more focused on engineering and physical world
Interesting. Yeah.
applications. And so so yeah, I didn't have a lot of stats background going into the actuarial world.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And the other thing I was going to ask you is, did you have any Microsoft Excel or any database programming experience beforehand?
Not really. So I guess I wound up doing I had some it's gonna kind of sound kind of funny. I had some Lotus 1-2-3
Oh,
experience.
yeah. I've
So
heard I've heard about that.
so that was like one of the the competitors to Excel at the time, which was
Yeah.
really just it was all very easily transferable to Excel.
Yeah.
But I had some of that in my classes, but then I picked up most of my Excel just on the job then.
Yeah. And that's I'm always curious with people because I didn't have like as a math major, I didn't really use Excel at all.
Right.
And but I was a minor in computer science, and having that programming background, I picked things up very quickly in terms of like, SQL, database stuff, Excel, and
Sure.
all that type of stuff. So I always tell people like programming is a really good skill to have, especially as an
Sure.
actuary.
Yes, yes.
So but while you were going through the exams, sounds like you started those after school. Did you use ACTEX at the time, or did you use another company for studying for exams, or did you just use classic textbooks? I'm curious.
Sure, I used a mix all through. I definitely remember some ACTEX manuals. It was funny when I first came to work at ACTEX. I remember looking through their archives and it was like, "Hey, I had this manual." I could kind of recognize.
Wow.
I could almost. It was almost like the smell brought me back 20 years to when I was taking an exam.
Yep.
But I did. I over the years I used a number of different ones. I actually took an in-person course with Sam Broverman. I used some Jam materials, which was a company that was founded by Mike Carmody, who now works at Coaching Actuaries.
Okay. Yep.
And then, but let's see, I was a big fan of actually just going to the source material as well. I really like to read through the books themselves, and
Yep.
and that was something that I actually enjoyed doing in terms of going through the books rather than just kind of cram. I mean, I think when I studied for the exams, one of the things I really always tried to focus on was to really get to the heart of it and enjoy the process as much as I could, because I think
Mm-hmm.
some people really focus on just pass the exam, but I definitely wanted to pass the exam. But the learning process, I mean, I'd always loved to learn, and I didn't want the exams to be just a process just focused on getting to the end, but to actually enjoy the process and try and get to the heart of each exam as I went through it.
Right. Yeah. This is going to sound very nerdy of me, but I similarly, I enjoyed the process of taking the exams as hard as they were. And I would make it like on a Saturday, if I was to study, I'm like, I'm going to go to a coffee shop, and my break is I'm going to get a coffee and a brownie. And it became like this whole experience that I look forward to. It's weird, but
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's interesting because these two, Roy Jew and Mike Jennings, who wrote a book with us on actuarial exam tactics, they actually they're writing a new section in their new edition that came out, and they called it on adherence and how to make sure you stick to your study schedule. And one of the things they talked about was it's called habit stacking. So it's like, let's just say you don't like to study, but you enjoy the coffee and the brownie. Then you kind of enjoy the whole experience. Like I enjoy going to the coffee shop, having the coffee and the brownie and the studying. So like the whole process as a whole is enjoyable. Maybe like certain parts of it are less enjoyable than others, but you can kind of, that motivates you more than maybe just focusing on the one aspect.
That's I mean, I 100% agree with that. That was my experience. That's interesting. And then like all the baristas got invested in my journey because they would like, because I went there for years studying, and then they would always be asking about my progress and stuff like that. So it became kind of a whole thing. But yeah, I like that. So the next thing I was curious about is the name ACTEX. Where did that come from?
Oh, sure. Well, so it came actually from actuarial texts. So like our actuarial textbook. So
okay.
So that's where ACTEX came from. And it's kind of funny because there's actually sometimes I remember when we first I think when ACTEX first, when the internet first came out, there's actually a men's underwear company that has the same name as well. So that they kind of took the ACTEX domain, but yeah, so that's where ACTEX comes from, actual textbook, like text.
That makes sense now.
Beyond that over the years, but
yeah,
this was back in 1972 when the name first came about. So
how did the company start in 1972? Then was it who was the founder?
So the founder is Dick London, and he was a professor at Northeastern University, and he taught a course on helping to prepare students for actuarial exams there. And he had these course notes that he put together. And over the years, just through, I guess, word of mouth, lots of students would share his notes. And he got requests from all over the country saying, hey, could I get a copy of your course notes? I heard they're really good, that they'll help you pass the exam. And at some point, he got so many requests, he says, hey, there might actually be a business here. And so he wound up, he did it on the side for a while he was a teacher, but he eventually was successful enough that he quit his job and dedicated himself full time to develop. Basically, then wound up morphing into the first study manual. And he realized he couldn't do it all on his own. And one of the first authors he recruited was Sam Broverman, who he met hiking while they were teaching at the same university.
Really?
So then it kind of morphed into a small publishing house where he recruited other authors, and wrote a study manual for all of the exams. And then over the years, it expanded. It really expanded to see, in response to what the company, either Dick or people leading the company at the time saw as the need among actuarial students in the actuarial profession, and expanded to, there was a need for some specialized textbooks. So we moved into the area of textbooks. Then there was more and more demand for study courses. So we offered live study, exam prep courses, then moved into DVD exam prep courses, and then eventually into online exam prep courses, which is definitely the preferred modality these days. And then moved into the area of online question banks and e-learning, and also into the area of and it was originally focused just on exam prep, but then over the years moved into reference guides, also reference books for practicing actuaries, and then also in the last few years we moved into the area of training and continuing professional development. So it was really just over the years expanded. It's always been focused on the actuarial profession and on maybe risk professionals, other professionals that are akin to actuary, that work with actuaries. But that's a little bit about our history.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd imagine that it really kind of transformed since 1972, just with technology and where everything's gone. But on that note, I was wondering, because there's still a lot of people, including myself, many times, that like the physical pages, when you're studying. Like, I like online. I like to use both.
Sure.
Do you find that there's still a lot of people that have that need or like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you in surveys we've done and in sales, it's represented that most, at least in comparing, say, the digital copy versus the print copy of a book, most people prefer a print copy of a book. And even if you look nationwide, it's about 80-20. Like 80% of people generally prefer a print book, 20% of people people prefer an ebook. And
Wow.
it had been increasing over time, and then actually dipped a little bit. So less people actually prefer ebooks now than say 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a slight dip, but it's kind of leveled out. It probably varies a little bit by industry and by age, but actually if you look at millennials actually prefer print in a higher proportion than previous
Wow.
than older generations. So
I wonder if it's partly due to like being on your phone all day and you want to get away from the screen, and
yeah, I think there's certainly something to that. And I mean, I think about it too. There's been some studies that show, and it remains to be seen whether it's just because of generational differences or what we're used to. But there are some studies that have shown that information we gather from a screen goes to a different part of our brain than information that we gather from print.
really,
And that the print section goes to a more permanent storage part of our brain. So
that's fascinating.
it's a very preliminary study, but there's a study that focused on specifically that. But it makes sense to me, at least from my perspective. So probably some of it has to do with our own perspective, how we interact with it. Maybe like for me personally, like when I'm looking on my phone or something, maybe it feels like more of a casual interaction, and then a book, it's like, okay, I'm focused on it.
Yes, totally.
So, but I think there are things worth asking yourselves when you sit down to study. What works for you, and what experience works for you, because there shouldn't, some people work well with one or the other, or some people work well with both. And so
yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear. And like the other thing I was thinking about is, especially they say like a couple hours before you go to bed, if you reduce your screen time, you'll sleep a lot better. I'm not saying that people are reading actuarial manuals as they go to sleep, but
sure.
But if you're going to read something before bed, it's better to read like a physical copy than it is on a screen.
That's true. Yeah, and there's also some studies that show like whatever you studied. I used to do this when I was studying. I used to like always like something I needed to review. I'd like right before going to sleep, I'd read it like the last 10 to 15 minutes before.
So it's like
going
in
to
your
sleep.
head. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's again, there's not, it's very preliminary studies, but some studies have tended to show that whatever you read right before bed sticks a little more in your mind than say what you read 3 hours before bed.
Yeah.
So that was just a little strategy I had. I don't know, it worked for me, but that it.
I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I mean, I think little things like that actually really help. Another strategy that I would use sometimes is like, if I didn't have any time in a day at all to study, I was like, I can make 1 minute or 5 minutes out of that day where I look at a problem and just get the problem in my head. Because like I found the more days that I did not think about it, the more I had to go back and review. So
sure. Yeah.
I think little things like that help.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and our subconscious mind is always working. The scientist who invented the benzene molecule actually had his breakthrough in a dream, not
Really?
while awake. Yep. He
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what originally, I know we talked about your background and how this ACTEX job was kind of perfect for you. Is that kind of what brought you to ACTEX originally, or what was the motivation to come there?
I guess I had, I was teaching high school right before coming here, and I reached a point where I just felt sometimes in life, you're like, I think this cycle is complete for now. I felt like I'd reached a point where I wanted to change. And so I was looking at going back. I had some young children at home, and I was looking at getting back into the actuarial world. I was probably looking for more of a non-traditional actuarial job. And when I started sending out my resume and this job came along, we kind of found each other, and it worked out great.
That's awesome. So as you've been there, can you give us an idea of two sides, some of the challenges of leading the company and then some of the rewards that you've experienced leading ACTEX?
Oh, sure. So some of the challenges, I guess, I always say at ACTEX, I've got to be a jack of all trades, master of none, in the sense that I've got to work with many different areas of actuarial science, life, P&C, exam prep, CPD training. And through that, I guess I've always been a bit of an ideas person, and I love coming up with new ideas. So I've had to really learn how to prioritize and to say no to certain ideas, because there's definitely more ideas and more good products, then we can actually dedicate time to. So
I
it's
believe
like
that.
you've got to discern out, the great from the good. So that's
Yes.
definitely been a challenge for me personally in terms of having that kind of discerning eye of saying like no, like killing projects, saying no to projects that maybe
Yep.
I'm attracted to, but just won't work for the company.
Yep.
And then I think another challenge is finding the right people to lead projects as well. Most of the people that we work with are external to ACTEX, with our authors and our instructors. Everybody's busy, and most people are doing this in addition to another job. Most people aren't full-time book authors or full-time exam instructors. So finding the right person, again, sometimes I'll have like a great idea for, I'd love to do this, but I just can't find the right person to do it.
Yes.
And sometimes the right person to do it doesn't have the time to dedicate to it. But and then like the rewards, I guess the rewards I'd say definitely, I love working to help other people succeed. So I love thinking, working for students, working for actuaries, helping them meet their needs. That's kind of like the end goal. And then there's also I get a lot of satisfaction about seeing a product from start to finish, like starting a project and seeing it from start to finish. So maybe more so than in some industry jobs, like we have the idea for a book, find the author comes to it and see it from start to finish, or have the idea for an online course, see it from start to finish.
Yes.
There's just a lot of satisfaction about, I think, seeing that end product and having been involved throughout the process. It feels, it feels almost like kind of like an artisan, like an artisan who builds
I believe that.
a
Yeah.
violin. Like from start to finish, you get like this satisfaction. So that's kind of something that I really enjoy.
Especially with your teaching background too, and like that you are really helping a lot of people with the products that you're creating. So I think that's probably pretty rewarding.
Yes.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned you work with a lot of independent people. I was curious kind of how that works being a publisher. Because whenever like as an actuary, I would go to ACTEX, I'd find a manual I want and I just order it. And I don't think about how the business side of it works. So are most of the people or most of the quote unquote employees just independent people that are creating these, and then you guys work together? Or
right.
how does that process work?
Right. I mean, so we do have employees, but most of the content development itself is done by external, I guess, vendors, or but I mean, vendors sounds kind of cool. I mean, authors and instructors that work with us and develop content for us. So so we work anywhere from between 80 and 100 authors and instructors who write books or write study manuals, develop webinars, develop online courses for us. And so a lot of what I do also has to do with reaching out to these people, being in contact, reaching out to authors and instructors, or seeking authors and instructors for a specific project if that's what we need, interacting with them, helping them to overseeing sometimes the development of content, editing it or finding people to edit it, reviewing it or finding people to review it. Sometimes working with the ideation of the project itself, because sometimes we have a great idea, but it needs to be refined. You need to have a couple of people look at it and be like, oh, this is great, but let's make a little change here or there.
So is that kind of how you stay updated when, for instance, when the SOA changes all the exams? Do you have independent people go in and work on their textbooks to update them? Or
sure. I mean, in most cases, it would probably be if it's a similar, like like MLC changing to LTAM, which is most of it was the same. Generally, it would be the same author updating their manual for that.
Because like a lot of it's still the same material.
Because a lot of it's still the same material. Then sometimes there's a brand new exam like predictive analytics or SRM, and so we need to find a new author to do that. And so sometimes, so it's working with a network, sometimes trying to put out advertisement, emails or advertisements, or we need to find the people that are the right people to develop that material.
And you're mostly focused on actuarial, but you also mentioned risk management. Are there other areas that you've kind of branched out into?
So we've generally, I'd say most of our work is really focused on actuarial. Some of our CPD and training, we've had data scientists or underwriters or accountants come to trainings and webinars that we offer because it's really very useful to them as well.
Right.
But I'd say that in general, most of what we do is really focused on actuarial.
Okay. And also on that topic, once you become credentialed, as we all know as actuaries, we need continuing education to keep up our credential.
Yep.
Do you guys offer any courses or anything that counts as CPD if actuaries want to come to ACTEX?
Yes, yeah. So we currently offer 2 webinars a month on a variety of different topics. We've offered about 60 webinars to date, and we have some online courses as well that you can do at any time, like on professionalism, gap accounting principles. And then we do have some people that also do live training for us. So we've offered some customized live training for companies.
Right.
On different topics as well. So that started several years ago. I really felt that there was a potential in the marketplace. There's a lot of great CPD offered by the actuarial societies, but we just felt that there was room for more, and so that's how we got into this.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine there'd be room for more, especially knowing that, you have to get, what is it, 60, is it 60 hours every 2 years or something? I can't remember, 50 or 60 hours every 2 years. So it's like, I feel like otherwise you're going to start cycling through the material. So having a lot out there, I think, is helpful for some variety.
Right. Yeah. And also, I mean, there's CPD, unlike the exams, it's like the CPD is not constrained by any specific curriculum. So there are, topics that haven't been covered, that have not been covered, or specialties have not been plumbed, or, so when we look at it, I mean, I think one of the things I have as my principles, I don't want to duplicate stuff that's already out there, but rather come up with new content that will add value to the actuarial community as a whole. So that's what
really
we try to do
nice.
as a company.
Yeah, because I feel like at least at companies that I've been at, a lot of times they'll pay for like one conference, for example, per year. So like, let's say you go to 2 conferences in 2 years, that'll cover a good amount, but you still have more CPD credits you got to get. You got to find ways to get those. So
yeah,
so it's good to know that ACTEX has all that.
Yeah.
All right, so we want some advice from you. Actuaries want to know, this is always the biggest question, is balancing life, work, and exams. And what I was always told is that only 2 of those can survive. What are your thoughts on that?
What, work, exams, and life? Wait.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that? And do you have any advice to balance those?
Oh, sure. Well, that's a really great I mean, so I'll have some of my own advice, and I'll share some advice also from some other people that I know. But like, as I was thinking about this, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind, which I think can become, some people, it can become maybe a little bit. Sometimes I think people hear it so often that they just tune it out. But I mean, one thing that I always say is to like live focused in the present moment. So I mean, I think one of the things that's easy to do is it's like while you're working, you're worried about exams. While you're studying for your exams, you're worried about work. While you're at home with your kids, you're worried about work and exams. And so it's like you're not doing any of the 3 well while you're doing each one of the 3.
Right.
And so it's like you're using, and I think like, if you're 80% focused, it probably equals 50% of productivity, So it's kind of like getting that last little bit of distraction probably creates this like extra jump in what you can get accomplished. So I mean, that's one thing that seems simple, but at the same time, it's extremely hard to do. To kind of, and then another thing I think too is always, I think coming back to like your why, like why you're doing this, and enjoying the process. I mean, because I think sometimes it's like we go through life like, I've got to eat this food fast so I can then like study for my exams. I got to study for my exams fast so I can pass, so I can pass my exams fast so I can make money. And it's kind of like, but if you enjoy the process, like everything just becomes a little more like while you're working, enjoy the work, while you're studying, enjoy, and then I think that just naturally makes it a little more balanced, if you will, because sometimes
enjoy that brownie and coffee while you're studying. Make sure to enjoy that.
Yeah. And then I mentioned them earlier, but like Roy Jew and Mike Jennings wrote this book, Actuarial Exam Tactics, that goes into just like also some ways of, I think, there's some ways of studying, kind of like, some like coming up with these strategies that can also, maybe we don't always have to. I think sometimes we have these mental structures, I have to study this many hours in a day. I have to, like, maybe coming up with some new, taking a step back and looking at the structures you've built around how you study, how you work, how you live your life. And I think re-examining that can sometimes yield unexpected benefits. I mean, like, for example, when I was studying for my last actuarial exam, I was commuting an hour and a half each way, 3 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I was struggling with studying. And then I happened to find out, like, oh, there's this, like, this company that has, audio flashcards. And so I bought the audio flashcards. And so I was like, listening to that, an hour and a half each way. But, or, if I didn't have that, maybe I could have recorded it. But anyways, that's kind of like looking for those hidden efficiencies too. That's what I mean, like taking a step back. You don't need to have necessarily 2 hours at a desk a day studying. Maybe there's something that you're not thinking of that can break down some of those barriers to help you get a little more balance.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think enjoying the process is pretty important. Asking the why too is always a good one. I mean, I always kind of go back to that myself, because it's like, I don't want to get in the trap of like, I'm 5 years into something and I hate my life, but I'm going to keep doing it because I put 5 years into it. But you can always learn from the 5 years and do something totally different and like adjust. Like I like to adjust in life. So
yeah. Well, and I mean, I think too, like, because sometimes I hear people maybe some situations like really can't be changed and you have to like work within that. But I mean, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, things are crazy at work, I can't study, and like my life at home is a wreck because I'm spending so much time here. I mean, if I were in that situation too, it's, you take a step back and be like, okay, like re-examine. Maybe I need to talk to my boss and say, look, I can't take on all these projects. Or maybe I need to, if I really want to pass exams, maybe I need to change jobs. Or maybe I mean, there's like there's nothing like there's certain things that are predetermined, but there's other things that are not. And we sometimes let ourselves get stuck in like, I have to do all these projects. I have to be at this job. I have to pass all these exams. So
totally.
So
yeah, exactly. But I think we kind of get into that mental state of mind. And it's like, it's good to just zoom out and be like, I am just a tiny little human on this huge earth. I always like to look at a picture of a globe. I would do that sometimes.
That's good. Yeah. But it gives you perspective.
It does. So on all this, to kind of get wrapping this up, what keeps you motivated overall? I think you kind of hit on that in your last comments, but what would you say is the ultimate thing that keeps you motivated?
Yeah, I guess I mean, at my work, I think the why, I mean, focusing on the end, on the meaning of my work, like what it accomplishes, there's a lot to that in terms of why am I doing this? And so in my mind, that becomes, I want to help the people using our materials. I want to have a good relationship with my coworkers. I want to make a meaningful contribution to the world around me. I want to provide for my family and my children. And so I guess all of those keep me motivated to do what I do. But I mean, it is something that I think requires like a regular reanalysis and readjustment, in a sense. Like, if at some point I find myself saying, why am I doing this? This is meaningless, or, something isn't working. Maybe there's something that, maybe there's a project I took on that wasn't the right project for us, and not every, you can't, it's not a utopia where every single project will, but I mean, like, if I think like these thoughts sometimes that come are almost like a warning bell, like, oh, something's not quite right. And maybe it's because I don't know, I've lost touch with, what why I'm doing this, or maybe my relationship with a coworker isn't what it should be. I think like there's certain adjustments then that can help me to readjust and be like, okay, I readjusted and now I'm motivated again. But if I'm feeling unmotivated, that's kind of like
right.
Whoop, 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 like readjust. Something's not right.
That's great. That's great advice. I mean, I've even found times when I have a lack of sleep, it'll affect everything. And then I get a good night's sleep and I'm like, oh yeah, I do enjoy this. And I'm like super excited about what I'm doing. I just need to get more sleep.
Right. Or whatever, Sure. Yeah.
But okay. 2 last fun questions. What is your favorite hobby outside of work?
Oh, I guess probably my favorite hobby would be ultimate frisbee. I was a big fan of ultimate frisbee.
Ah, nice.
And when I lived in Argentina, I did a lot of work developing the sport down there. And it's a unique sport. It's like a completely self-refereed. So I mean, like they have world championships of it where there's no referee. People have trained the whole year, and it's completely self-officiated. And
that's crazy.
When they invented the sport, they said like the rule about they say the spirit of the game is the most important rule, and they could define the spirit of the game as essentially the golden rule: treat the others as you'd like to be treated.
Yep.
And so it just creates a unique culture. I mean, it's a sport that I love, and then also I just think there's a really unique culture to it.
That's awesome. I love ultimate frisbee. It's fun. I mean, I've never competed at that level, but just for fun playing it, it's a fun game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a good workout too. A lot of sprinting.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, favorite spot you've ever traveled in the world?
Favorite spot. That's a good one. Well, so I'm gonna answer with 2 questions. I guess my first two answers. My first favorite spot is Buenos Aires because that's where I met my wife. So
nice.
That's I mean, I lived there for a long time, so it's almost like I don't feel like I visited there because I lived there, but I mean, so that was definitely the place that has added the most and had the most profound impact on my life.
That's awesome.
And then in terms of more of like a visit, not really going somewhere and staying there, I'd say Japan. I went there for work and before I was in Tokyo and some other areas close to Tokyo. And it was just, I've been to lots of areas in the Americas, and even though the cultures were very different, I'd never experienced anything quite like the cultural difference going to Japan. And it was just really interesting. And I loved all the food over there as well. I really love Japanese food. They put a lot of, what's the word? I mean, they just put a lot into the details of their food and life in general too. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like in Japan, I remember when they give you your change, like they give you the money with 2 hands, or if they give you their business card, they give you your business card with like 2 hands.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Which was interesting. Like it seemed odd at first, but then it was like, then when I experienced that and I came back to the States, it was almost like people give you a business card with 1 hand. It seems almost kind of rude, because it's like they're not really putting almost like the dedication to the present moment that I'm giving you this business card right now. I'm going to do it in the best way possible and give you all my attention.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. So, I've heard Japan's awesome. My uncle and cousin did a big ski trip out there. They're big into skiing, and apparently I don't remember where they went, but they said the skiing was amazing.
Oh, well. Yeah, I didn't get to go skiing there, but I can imagine they've got a lot of mountains there.
Yeah. So anyway, Stephen, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
This was very insightful, and thank you everyone who watched. So please tune in because we have some more great guests coming on. And I guess that's it. So Stephen, the ultimate frisbee, president of ACTEX, multi-talented guy, is out from, where are you? New Hartford, you said?
New Hartford, Connecticut.
New Hartford, Connecticut. I'm out from Spokane, Washington. And all right. We will see you all next time.
Thanks for having me on, Paul. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.